The millionaire secretly followed his maid. The truth left him speechless. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching this story from? And if you love emotional love stories full of struggle, overcoming, and new beginnings, subscribe to the channel. That really helps the channel grow and motivates me to keep bringing stories that touch the heart. Night was slowly falling over Savannah, painting the sky a deep blue, mixed with burnt orange. The windows of the historic mansions reflected the last light of the sun, and the palm trees swayed in the warm, humid breeze. At the top of the hill, overlooking the river, stood the Whitmore Grand Resort, imposing, luxurious, flawless. Inside, the air was chilled by central air conditioning, the silence broken only by the rhythmic sound of heels echoing on the marble floors. Benjamin Whitmore III walked alone through that corridor on the top floor. Tall, athletic, with light, brown, wavy hair carefully slicked back, he had grayish-green eyes that seemed to judge everything they saw. He wore an expensive white linen shirt that looked too costly to be casual and perfectly tailored trousers. He didn't usually walk around there at that hour, but something, an uneasy feeling, made him investigate quietly. In the last few weeks, he'd been hearing stories about one of the cleaning staff. It wasn't your typical gossip, it was different. They said that after her shift, she stayed late at the resort, doing something unusual. At first, Ben ignored it. But that night, for some reason he couldn't explain, he decided to follow his instincts. From behind a frosted glass wall, he saw Angela Moreno for the first time. She was on her knees on the marble floor, scrubbing hard at an invisible stain. Her black hair was tied up in a loose bun, strands falling over her sweaty face. Her light, brown skin glowed under the cold lighting, and the simple uniform couldn't quite hide the firmness of her body. But what caught Ben's attention wasn't her appearance, it was her voice. Angela was singing softly, an old Spanish song, sweet and melancholic, echoing gently through the empty hallways. Her voice was steady, in tune, and carried a weight Ben couldn't name. He leaned against the wall, unnoticed, watching. Suddenly she stopped singing and reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small, crumpled, worn photo and kissed it tenderly. Then she whispered, unaware she was being heard, "One more day down, Abuelita. One more step, just a little more, I promise." Ben frowned. That caught him off guard. He was expecting to find something shady, a mistake, a flaw. But what he found was faith and exhaustion and a kind of strength he didn't understand. A few minutes later, she got up, wiped the sweat from her forehead with her sleeve, and headed toward the supply room. He followed in silence, keeping his distance. When she exited through the back, he did too, sticking to the shadows. With his jacket hood up and his footsteps silent, he followed her through the narrow streets of Savannah's old town, where the streetlights flickered lazily. Angela walked for 20 minutes until she stopped in front of an old, nearly crumbling building. She climbed the stairs carrying shopping bags. Ben, across the street, watched. A few minutes later, she came back down, this time with aluminum, food containers in a cardboard box. Not understanding, he kept following her. And then came the shock. In the alley next to the abandoned train station, she knelt before 3 homeless people. She handed them the meals carefully, smiling. "Don't forget to eat slowly, okay? It's still warm." She pulled a blanket from the box and placed it over the shoulders of an elderly woman. "It's gonna get cold tonight. I'll be back tomorrow." Ben stopped. He stood still. He was breathing slower, as if he had intruded on something sacred. His eyes, used to numbers and contracts, had just witnessed a gesture expecting nothing in return. No vanity, no audience. Angela looked up at the sky, closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, God. Even tired, I can still love." That sentence pierced the silence around Ben like a muffled thunder. Something inside him, hard, jammed for years, cracked. For the first time since his father's funeral, he felt like crying, and it wasn't out of sadness, it was shame. He went back home without her noticing, entered the luxurious loft he called home, surrounded by modern art and cold concrete, and sat on the edge of the bed, slowly took off his shoes, then his watch, and stared at his own reflection in the mirror. For the first time, Benjamin Whitmore III wasn't sure who he really was. She, just a maid, and yet has more dignity than I've ever had. The millionaire who used to silently judge everything was now the one being judged, and by the simplest truth. The truth he saw left him speechless. The next day, the resort carried on with its luxurious, meticulously rehearsed routine. The staff moved like pieces on a well-trained chessboard, discreet, fast, invisible to the millionaire guests. But Benjamin Whitmore III, in a dark suit and distant gaze, couldn't focus on any of the meetings, nor the spreadsheets or the board's complaints about rising maintenance costs. The image of the young woman kneeling in the alley, eyes to the sky and a blanket over the shoulders of a homeless woman, wouldn't leave his mind. It was like a photograph that refused to fade. In the afternoon, back in his glass office on the resort's top floor, Ben stood in front of the window, watching the Savannah River flowing in the distance. He held a glass of whiskey, untouched, between his fingers. Behind him, the voice of his trusted assistant Thomas broke the silence. "Mr. Whitmore, you asked me to gather information about the cleaning employee, Angela Moreno, correct?" Ben slowly turned, crossing his arms. "Yes. What did you find out?" Thomas, a middle-aged man with an overly tight tie and a tablet in hand, hesitated for a second. "She's been working here for 8 months, came through a temp agency, never missed a day, never been late. Lives in a small apartment on West Victory Drive, shares rent with an elderly grandmother and a teenage sister who, according to medical records, underwent cancer treatment last year." Ben remained silent. "She also studies nursing at night at Savannah Technical College on a scholarship, several compliments from her professors, and—" Thomas lowered his voice, uncomfortable. "She's been making meals at home and handing them out to homeless people nearby, on her own." Ben clenched his jaw, staring into space. That wasn't what he expected to hear. He was looking for a reason behind the uneasy feeling he had, like he was being challenged by an invisible presence. "Does she have any history with drugs, ties to extremist religious groups, any scandal?" Thomas shook his head, visibly embarrassed. "Nothing, sir. Not even a parking ticket." Ben stepped closer to the desk and set the glass down harder than he meant to. It rattled. He sat and rubbed his forehead with the palm of his hand. "Then why the hell does she sing like the whole world is falling apart and she still has hope?" Thomas looked at him, surprised by his tone. "Sir?" Ben quickly straightened up. "Nothing. You're dismissed." Once alone, he spent a few seconds staring at the immaculate desk in front of him. Photos with leadership awards, magazines with his face on the cover as one of the most promising heirs in the southern US. But none of those images looked like him right now. That night, he stayed in the office later than usual, and just as he expected, she showed up, wearing the navy blue uniform, hair tied up high, her face even more tired than the day before. A worn-out backpack on her shoulders and a broom in hand. Angela cleaned the floor with firm, steady movements. In the background, her voice rose again, in Spanish, soft, laced with a painful nostalgia. Ben stayed in the room, silently watching, but this time the door was ajar. And Angela noticed. She stopped singing suddenly, her eyes widening slightly. She froze for a few seconds, like she'd been caught doing something wrong. Ben looked up slowly and said, with a calmness that surprised even him, "You sing really well." Angela hesitated, staying where she was. She answered in a low but steady voice, "Sorry, sir." I didn't realize you were still here. I usually sing to keep from falling asleep. No need to apologize, he said, standing up. It's rare to find someone who can seem human around here. She frowned, unsure if that was a compliment or sarcasm. She just nodded politely and went back to work. Ben watched the way she moved, her injured fingers, the face carrying traces of chronic exhaustion. But there was something in her posture, a kind of silent pride, that made it all seem bearable. Like she refused to be a victim of her own story. The next moment, Angela lifted the bucket, rested it on her hip, and gave him a direct look. If you're worried about something, you can ask me directly. I'm used to being doubted. Ben narrowed his eyes, surprised by her boldness. You always talk to your boss like that? Only when he looks at me like I'm a mystery he's trying to solve. There was a thick silence between them. Neither looked away. That night, Benjamin didn't follow Angela through the streets. He didn't need to. For the first time, he felt something much bigger was happening, something beyond his control. And somewhere inside him, an uncomfortable feeling started to take hold, curiosity. But he didn't yet know that this curiosity was about to change everything. That same week, on a stuffy Friday night, Ben watched the resort's evening activity from his private balcony. The distant sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and ambient music irritated him more than soothed. Everything was there: wealth, prestige, power. But somehow, none of it seemed to matter the same way anymore. Since that brief exchange with Angela, something inside him had gone quiet, a disturbing silence, like an echo of himself he was trying to avoid. It was almost midnight when he saw her on the security camera feed on his phone, discreetly crossing the service lobby. The wrinkled uniform, the old backpack on her shoulders, and a cardboard box in her hands. She didn't look like she was going straight home. Overcome by a restlessness he couldn't name, he took the emergency stairs down, changed jackets, pulled the hood over his head, and slipped out unnoticed. He followed her from a distance, using the shadows. Angela walked briskly along the dimly lit sidewalk of Jefferson Street, avoiding the crowded bars and curious stares. She passed two corners, crossed the main avenue, and disappeared down a narrow alley between two abandoned buildings. Ben hesitated for a second. That alley was dark, smelly, and not the kind of place someone like him usually set foot in. But there was something in her purposeful steps that drove him forward. He followed. Behind a rusty dumpster he hid, and then he saw it. Angela knelt in front of a group of people sitting on the ground. 3 adults and 2 children huddled under torn blankets. Her face, though exhausted, wore a peaceful smile. One of the men, with a white beard and sunken eyes, reached out his hand. She took it gently. "Brought rice with chicken today, Mr. Lenny. And I made the tea you like, mint with ginger." She handed him a carefully wrapped foil meal, then handed the rest to the others. The youngest girl, with messy hair and a wary look, hesitated. "It's for you, sweetie," Angela said gently. "You exist, little one, and if you exist, you deserve to eat." The child slowly took the meal, and without saying a word, curled up in her mother's lap, who smiled through tearful eyes. Ben felt a knot tighten in his throat. The box Angela had carried was now almost empty, but she didn't look frustrated. On the contrary, she knelt beside one of the women and draped a blanket over her shoulders. "It's gonna get colder later. Don't let the baby stay uncovered, okay?" The woman nodded, holding Angela's hand longer than expected. "You're an angel, girl. I don't know why you still come here with so much hate in this world." Angela answered simply, "My grandma used to say that when you've got nothing left to give, you can still give your love." Ben looked away, taking a deep breath. A heavy weight seemed to form in his chest. Those words hit him like bricks, knocking down walls he hadn't known existed. She stood up with effort, stretching her aching back, and looked up at the dark sky. "Thank you, God. Even in scarcity, Love is still abundant. Ben stepped back as if pushed. That woman he had once seen as just a maid, a replaceable cog in the machine of his empire, was there, handing out dignity in a forgotten alley. And he, who had everything, had never knelt for anyone. The memory of his late father, selfish decisions, and all the people he had pushed away came back like shadows. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel proud. He felt guilty. Angela packed up what was left of the food, zipped her backpack carefully, and said goodbye with affectionate waves. She walked right past Ben without seeing him. He stayed hidden in the shadows, motionless. A man's voice echoed behind her. "Go with God, child. You're worth more than this world knows how to recognize." Ben heard that and felt the weight of the words like a verdict. There, in the city's shadows and grime, he saw a truth that left him in total silence. She wasn't a mystery. She was an answer to a question he didn't yet know how to ask. Angela went on her way, and Ben, for the first time, didn't feel like going home. He just stood there, staring at that alley like he was seeing the real world for the first time. And in that moment, he knew she was different, and he was changing. But he didn't yet know that feeling was just the beginning. The pain of not being able to save her was still coming. The next morning, the savannah sky was heavy, with thick clouds covering the sun like a silent omen. Inside the Whitmore Grand Resort, everything went on as usual. Polished receptionists, fresh flowers in the lobby, soft instrumental music flowing through the halls. But Benjamin Whitmore III walked with urgency and a hard expression, like he was battling something he couldn't control. He climbed 2 flights of stairs and entered the service wing, something he rarely did. The air smelled of disinfectant mixed with old coffee, and there she was, Angela, standing in front of the supply cabinet, fixing her hair into a messy bun, backpack still on, name badge crooked. Ben stopped a few steps away from her, his breathing uneven, like he had run. But he hadn't. It was something else, something more intimate, more unsettling. Angela. She turned slowly, surprised, a confused look in her hazel green eyes. "Mr. Whitmore?" He didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her, the tired lines on her face, the faint circles under her eyes, her hands marked by soap and effort. And yet, there was something about her, a presence that didn't bow. He cleared his throat, trying to stay formal. "I have a proposal." Angela narrowed her eyes. "A proposal?" "A position just opened on the executive team, personal assistant, directly with me." She took a while to react. The silence between them was thick. "With all due respect, why?" Ben avoided her gaze for a second, then returned it with a firm, almost defensive tone. "You're disciplined, you're discreet, and I need someone I can trust." Angela smiled, but it wasn't a grateful one. It was brief, guarded, the kind of smile someone gives when they doubt the world's sudden kindness. "Or you just want to keep me close so you can figure out why I don't fit your mold." Ben stepped forward, feeling the air shift between them. "You have no idea what I'm thinking, and you have no idea what I've lived." The tension in the air was palpable, but there was something else hidden there, an invisible thread starting to stretch between them. He stepped back and regained his controlled posture. "The salary's 3 times your current one, fixed schedule and benefits." Angela hesitated. Her eyes dropped for a second. She thought of her grandma needing expensive meds, her sister, still fragile, needing care, the sleepless nights, the crowded buses, the quiet fight to not give up. "And if I say no?" Ben took a deep breath. "You're free to do that, but think about it. Sometimes being closer to the person you judge can tell you more about yourself." She stared at him firmly, but didn't answer, just nodded, still unsure. At the end of the shift, when everyone else had left, Angela walked to Ben's office. She knocked on the door, which was slightly open. "I'll take it." He looked up from his laptop. "Are you sure?" "No, but life's never given me that luxury." Ben just watched as she placed her old badge on his desk. "If you're looking to control me, you'll be disappointed. But if you want to know me, you'll need courage." And she walked out. Ben stayed there, still. For the first time, someone had challenged him without fear. Not because of status, not out of interest, but out of truth. And that disarmed him more than any business negotiation ever had. In the silence that followed, he realized she had taken the job, but she hadn't surrendered. And he, who thought he was in control, had just stepped into a game he didn't know how to play. The main hall of the Whitmore Grand Resort was unrecognizable that night. Crystal chandeliers sparkled like fake stars over the gathered elite. Red carpets, extravagant flower arrangements, waiters moving around with silver trays. It was the annual celebration for the investors of the chain, the kind of event where dresses cost more than most employees' yearly salaries and smiles were sharp as blades. Angela Moreno watched everything from a quiet corner, wearing a simple black dress, light fabric, rented from a modest downtown shop. Her hair, usually tied up for practicality, now fell straight over her shoulders. Even so, she couldn't feel at ease. It was like she wore an invisible badge on her forehead, the promoted maid. Ben had convinced her to come. He wanted to introduce her to the executive team as his new personal assistant, claiming it was important for her to be part of the corporate backstage. But Angela knew. She knew he wanted her close. She knew she was still being watched, maybe even tested. What she didn't know was how hostile his world still was to hers. She was walking near the drinks table when a blonde woman in a tight, emerald green dress and perfectly painted lips intercepted her with a piercing look. It was Victoria Lane, a socialite known in Savannah's high society, wife of one of the major shareholders in the Whitmore Group. "Excuse me," said Victoria, raising an eyebrow. "Aren't you supposed to be serving?" Angela blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" Victoria let out a dry laugh and looked around, already drawing the attention of other nearby women. "Sweetie, this area's for guests. If you're lost, the exit's that way." Angela tried to stay composed. "I'm not lost. I was invited." Victoria looked her up and down like she was inspecting a stain on an expensive dress. "Invited? Who exactly thought it was a good idea to mix staff with society?" The discreet chuckles around her echoed like slaps. Angela felt her face burn. Her eyes searched for Ben. He was just a few feet away talking to investors, but he had clearly heard it. Their eyes met and hesitated. Angela waited for him to say something, to defend her, to tell the world who she was now, but he didn't move. Victoria spoke again, louder this time. "Don't take it the wrong way, sweetie. Your little uniform is adorable, but no matter how well you dress, some places just weren't made for everyone." That's when Angela stepped forward. Her hands trembled, but her voice came out firm. "You're right. There are places that weren't made for everyone, like your world, where appearances matter more than character." The room went silent. She turned to Ben. "And there are silences that say more than any words." He looked like he was swallowing hard, but still didn't move. Angela then pulled the gold badge from her bag and raised her voice without fear. "I thought maybe, with effort and dignity, it was possible to rise. But now I understand. The problem isn't where I came from. It's that you never wanted me to arrive." She placed the badge on the central table next to a champagne glass. "I'm not for sale by salary or sympathy. I don't need a job that forces me to lower my eyes." And in front of everyone, she turned and walked toward the exit. Her posture upright, gaze steady, eyes filled with tears but not broken. Ben followed her with his eyes. The sound of her heels echoed on the marble floor like a quiet accusation. Victoria gave a smug little smile like someone who'd won. But Ben didn't respond. He stood there, feeling a bitter taste in his mouth. He knew he had failed, not as a businessman, but as a man. And watching her disappear through the golden doors, something inside him went with her. The trust she was starting to give him, the chance he had and let slip away. Outside the resort, the night had cooled down, as if reflecting the emptiness now growing inside Ben. The gala lights sparkled behind him, but he no longer saw any meaning in the luxury. Everything felt fake. The muffled sound of music still leaked through the closed doors, but the silence inside him screamed louder. He walked briskly, not even knowing exactly where he was going. He just knew he had to see her. He had to understand. He needed to make it right, though deep down, he knew it might already be too late. At the entrance of the small apartment complex where Angela lived, the receptionist looked at him with suspicion. The suit, expensive watch, and polished leather. Shoes clashed with the simple building, its peeling walls and smell of home-cooked food in the air. "I'm looking for Angela Moreno. She lives here, right?" The woman hesitated, crossing her arms. "And who are you?" Ben took a deep breath. "Someone who messed up, but who needs to understand just how much." The woman stared at him for a few seconds and, maybe moved by something in his eyes, replied, "Apartment 203, second floor. But if she screams, I'm calling the cops." He nodded. "That's fair." He climbed the narrow steps, heart racing, knocked on the door and waited. No answer. He was about to knock again when the door cracked open. Angela appeared with her hair down, wearing a loose t-shirt and a startled expression. In her lap, a girl of about 15, very thin, with a scarf covering her head. "Did you lose your way back to your world?" she asked coldly. "No, I lost my way to what's right, and I came to find it." She crossed her arms firmly. "I've got nothing to say to you." But then a soft, hoarse voice came from the couch. "Angie, is everything all right?" The voice belonged to an elderly woman, wrinkled skin, graying hair, and small but sharp eyes. She slowly approached, leaning on a cane. She had indigenous features, rough hands, and a gentle look. Angela sighed and opened the door, though reluctantly. "Don't yell. The neighbor hears everything." Ben stepped in cautiously. He looked around the modest living room, worn furniture, old photos on the walls, an open Bible on the table. The grandmother watched him curiously. The sister, now coughing softly, smiled sweetly. "You're the rich boss, right? The one with the promotion?" Ben nodded sheepishly. "I am." Angela walked over to her sister and gently adjusted the scarf on her head. "This is Isabella, and this is our abuelita, Dolores." Ben looked at them both, feeling a weight in his chest. Angela continued, "I got into college on a partial scholarship. I was in my second semester of nursing when Isabella was diagnosed. Leukemia. The scholarship didn't cover the treatment. And my grandma, well, she's an immigrant, been here since the 80s, but never got her papers straight." Dolores nodded slowly. "Lots of people promised help, but always with a price." Angela looked at him firmly. "So I gave everything up, started working 3 shifts, morning at the hospital, afternoons cleaning offices, nights at the resort. And I still cook to hand out meals, not out of charity, but because I know what it feels like to be invisible." Ben slowly sat down. His words came out broken. "I didn't know." "Of course not. People like you never do, because you never ask." The silence was crushing. "Do you have any idea what it was like for me to walk into that hall yesterday?" she went on. "I rented a second-hand dress, sewed the hem the night before. Spent hours practicing how to walk without looking out of place, and all I got was a label." Ben rubbed his face, clearly shaken. "My father died thinking I never cared about his pain. He got sick, and I stayed focused on business. I avoided The hospital, avoided talking. I was a coward. Seeing you take care of your family with so little, with so much courage, made me feel a shame I didn't even know how to carry." Angela didn't respond, just lowered her eyes for a moment. Dolores stepped closer, touching her granddaughter's shoulder. "Sometimes God shows truth through the falls." Isabella smiled weakly, but with a light in her eyes. "You're not that scary." Ben smiled back. "I am scared. Because now I see that everything I built might not mean anything if I keep ignoring who really matters." Angela looked at him with a mix of hurt and compassion. For the first time, the hardness in her eyes softened a little. "If you want to understand what's real, you'll have to start cleaning your own wounds." Ben stood up slowly, and before leaving placed an envelope on the table. "It's not charity, it's responsibility for the pain I caused and the pain I ignored." He left without saying anything else. Angela picked up the envelope and hesitated to open it. Inside, there was no money, just a card with a single handwritten sentence. "I want to learn to see." She stood there, torn between the memory of humiliation and the possibility, slim but real, that someone like Ben Whitmore might actually be changing. The following days passed in silence. Angela didn't reply to Ben's messages, nor did she show up at the resort. He, however, didn't push. He knew there were too many wounds between them for words to heal what his silence had caused, but he couldn't sit still. Something inside him, maybe guilt, maybe something deeper, drove him to act. That same week, Ben quietly hired a legal team specializing in immigration. He asked them to be fast, efficient, and discreet. Within weeks, they managed to reopen an old legalization case for Angela's grandmother. At the same time, he paid, through third parties, for the surgery her sister desperately needed, all under complete secrecy. Ben didn't want recognition, didn't want her to know. For the first time, his gesture wasn't about control, impressing or fixing his image. It was just for her. For days, he kept asking himself why he was doing it. The answer was always the same, because no one had ever made him feel so small, and at the same time so human. But secrets don't last forever. On a rainy afternoon, Angela came home with grocery bags and found her grandmother emotional, holding papers and crying. "Angie, my case was approved. They said a law office handled everything, that someone anonymous paid for it all. I don't understand." Her sister, Isabella, came out of the room smiling. "And the hospital called. My surgery's scheduled. Everything's paid for, even the meds." Angela stood frozen. The world seemed to spin slower. A suspicion grew inside her like a storm. The next day, she went to the immigration office and pressed a clerk. Then the hospital. She called contacts, gathered clues. And in the end, there was no doubt, Benjamin Whitmore III was behind it all. That night, she showed up at his loft without warning. She wore the same simple clothes, but her eyes were different, hardened, wounded. Ben opened the door, surprised, but relieved. "Angela, You did all this thinking I'd come running back? That I'd melt for your credit card?" "Generosity." "No, I just wanted to help. Without telling me, without asking, you think you can just barge into my life like it's a failing company that needs investment. I didn't see it like that." "Well, you should have," she said, eyes tearing up, "because maybe it's just money to you. But to me, it's my story, it's my fight, it's my pride." Ben stepped closer, trying to reach her with his eyes. "You're getting me wrong, Angela. I didn't do this to buy you. I did it because I care." She took a deep breath, fighting the tears. "You don't get it." And with a choked voice, she handed him a folded envelope. "Maybe this will help you understand." Before he could say another word, she walked out. And for the first time, Ben didn't try to stop her. He sat on the couch, hands trembling, and opened the envelope. Inside was a simple piece of paper, handwritten with clean, steady handwriting. I saw you, and for a moment, I wanted to be seen too. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes. The silence wrapped around him like mourning. She didn't hate him, which was even worse. She saw him, saw something in him that even he couldn't. And for a moment, she wanted to believe. But he ruined it. And now, what was left was a deep emptiness. The kind that comes from a love that almost was, but bleeds like a wound too raw to heal with promises. Autumn came quickly to Savannah, painting the trees in shades of ochre and sweeping the sidewalks with dry leaves. But inside Benjamin Whitmore III's office, the atmosphere was different, tense, urgent, with the annoying sound of phones ringing non-stop. Ben, sitting in front of a screen, read and reread the headlines spreading across news sites. Millionaire caught following employee, the case that shocked the Southern elite. Harassment or obsession. Video puts luxury resort CEO in hot water. The video had been edited. Internal security cameras at the resort captured scenes out of context. Ben, following Angela down the hallways at night, staring at her when he thought no one was watching, entering the same elevator seconds later. There was no audio, of course, nor were there any clips of her speaking to him willingly or giving him the letter. None of that made it into the edit. Behind the setup was Raymond Carter, a former operations director fired months ago for corruption. A bitter man who knew the system from the inside and exactly where to strike. Thomas, the loyal assistant, entered the room with quick steps, his face tense. They're demanding a press conference. The shareholders are furious. And the board's meeting tomorrow. Ben, you need to defend yourself. Ben didn't answer immediately. He stared at the screen where Angela's image, taken from a screenshot of the video, was plastered across a gossip site, as if she were guilty just for existing. They want me to deny everything? He asked, eyes still locked on the screen. Yes, say it was all a misunderstanding, that she provoked you, that she was an ambitious employee. Ben clenched his fists on the desk. You know that's not true. Of course I do, but no one's going to care. They want a villain, and you're the most convenient one. Thomas stepped closer carefully. Ben, if you show the message, exchanges, the letter she left, the records of your help, you clear your name, save the resort, reverse everything. Ben stared into the emptiness outside the window. His reflection in the glass looked older than he remembered. There was something new in his eyes, maybe weariness or dignity, and I destroy her life in the process? She's not even in the city anymore. No one knows where she went. This might be your only chance. Ben slowly stood. He pulled Angela's letter from the drawer, the same one he had reread every night since she left. He ran his fingers over her handwriting, a weight pressing on his chest. She trusted me, even when I didn't deserve it. Thomas stayed silent. I'd rather lose everything than use her name as a shield. That week, Ben refused all interviews. He didn't defend himself. He didn't expose Angela. He let the scandal grow like a wave. The press was ruthless, contracts were cancelled, investors jumped ship, stocks tanked. Within months, the Whitmore empire was sinking, and he, once ruthless in business, didn't lift a finger to stop it. For the first time, he chose silence and truth, even if it looked like defeat. One night, leaving the now empty building that was up for sale, he found a reporter waiting outside with a camera in hand. Mr. Whitmore, why didn't you defend yourself? Ben looked at her, a sad smile on his lips. Because not every truth needs to shout. He turned and walked down the sidewalk, wet from the light drizzle, and with that slow, steady step, the man who once had everything was finally learning the value of what money can't buy. Days turned into months. Savannah went on with its slow rhythm, its cloudy mornings and humble neighborhoods full of stories that rarely made headlines. Benjamin Whitmore III, was now just Ben. No titles, no resort, no weight from the last name that once opened every door he walked through. He lived in a small rented room behind an old house, picked up gigs as a consultant for local businesses, and avoided attention as much as possible. He'd become invisible, and for the first time had learned to hear the world without the filter of privilege. It was a stuffy Tuesday morning when he arrived at the community health clinic in the Kyla Brownville neighborhood. The cough he'd been ignoring for weeks was getting worse, and the expired antibiotics in his drawer weren't helping anymore. The building was simple, with peeling walls and motivational posters taped up. At reception, a kind woman asked him to wait. Ben sat in the corner of the room, between mothers with babies and elderly men with tired eyes. The fluorescent light flickered above his head. When his name was called, he stood up slowly. He entered the small exam room, and as he closed the door, time seemed to stop. There she was, Angela. Wearing a white coat, her hair tied back more, neatly now, but with the same light in her eyes, a light that mixed exhaustion and strength. On the embroidered name tag Nurse Moreno, there was a quiet dignity louder than any executive title. She froze too. For a moment, they just looked at each other, no words, just the weight of everything that had been said and left unsaid. Ben took a hesitant step forward. "If you want me to leave, I'll understand." Angela took a deep breath and grabbed the clipboard. "No, you've waited long enough." He sat down. She checked his blood pressure with firm, professional, but gentle hands. The contact between them was restrained, but inevitable. The air was so heavy with unspoken things that even the light seemed dimmer. When she finished, she sat across from him, keeping her posture. "You've got a mild infection, but if you don't treat it, it could turn into pneumonia." Ben nodded, looking away briefly. Then he looked at her again with a small, embarrassed smile. "You look beautiful." She didn't smile. "It was you, wasn't it?" she asked bluntly. "Who paid for Issa's surgery? Who got my grandma's?" "Papers in order." Ben didn't deny it. He just bowed his head for a second. When he looked back up, his voice trembled. "I just wanted to be worthy of your forgiveness." Angela gripped the clipboard tightly. She stayed silent for several long seconds, then murmured, "You don't get it. It was never about the money. It was about being seen. And I thought, for a moment, that you saw me." Ben swallowed hard. "I did, but only after you left did I understand what I was really seeing." She stood. The consultation was over. "Not all wounds close with regret, Ben." He stood too, slowly, "but sometimes they start to heal when we stop running from the pain." Angela looked at him, emotion in her eyes, but still holding back. He wasn't the same man anymore, but she wasn't the same woman carrying food in the dead of night either. "Caring for others' pain helped me heal mine," she said finally. "Now I know who I am, and no one will erase that again." Ben nodded with respect. "I don't want to erase anything. I just wanted to see you, even if from afar." She took a deep breath, opened the door. "If that's true, then maybe one day you'll see me again, the right way." Ben left the room with a heavy heart. There was no reconciliation in that moment, but there was something rarer, hope, and that, he knew, was more valuable than any victory. In the days following their reunion, Ben returned to his simple routine, but now carried something new inside him. Not lightness yet. It was a different kind of weight, the weight of a second chance that hadn't fully revealed itself, but was beginning to grow in the cracks of the silence between him and Angela. Then, one grey afternoon, she appeared. He was sweeping the sidewalk outside the small community workshop where he volunteered on Saturdays, when he heard the familiar sound of light footsteps behind him. He turned slowly. There she was, holding a brochure, wearing dark jeans, a plain white blouse, and a name badge around her neck. Her face had that same firm expression that always disarmed him, but now with a spark of hope in her eyes. "You said you wanted to see, so come see what I'm trying to build." Ben walked beside her to an old warehouse in the Thomas Square neighborhood. The front was modest, but inside pulsed with life. Colorful fabrics hung everywhere, tables with sewing machines, murals with quotes in Spanish and English, kids drawing on paper taped to the walls. "Roots of Hope," she said softly, handing him the brochure. "It's a project I started with other Latina women in the community. The idea is to empower, employ, and uplift the people no one sees." Ben looked through the printed material carefully. Photos of workshops, testimonials, stats on female unemployment among immigrants. It was all real, tangible, and there, for the first time, he saw Angela not as someone who resisted, but as someone who led. "And what do you want from me?" he asked, genuinely humble. She crossed her arms and gave a half smile. "Your hands, your time, your ears. If you've got that to give, that's enough." Ben nodded without hesitation. "Then you've got all of that, starting now." In the weeks that followed, he started like all the other volunteers. He carried boxes, served coffee, fixed windows, no perks, no special treatment. No one there knew him as the ex-CEO. He was just Ben, the guy who showed up early, stayed late, and listened more than he talked. Angela watched from a distance. At first, cautiously, but slowly, the walls between them became half-open doors. A shared glance here, a quiet laugh there, hands brushing while passing a box or bumping at makeshift tables. One rainy afternoon, he was helping set up a tent behind the warehouse when the tarp slipped from her hands. Ben caught it by reflex and ended up clasping her hands in his. For a moment, everything stopped. The rain hit the tarp, muffling the world. Angela looked at him like someone recognizing something lost and found. "You've changed," she said, almost in a whisper. Ben gently squeezed her hands. "You changed me, without trying, without asking for anything." She hesitated, but didn't pull away. "I just held up a mirror, and I finally had the courage to look." The space between them vanished, and under the yellow lights of the warehouse, with the soft sound of rain and the fabric swaying in the wind, their lips met. Not with urgency, not with regret, but with truth. A quiet kiss, full of everything they'd never said, and no longer needed to. When they pulled away, Angela rested her forehead against his and whispered, "I'm still learning to trust, and I'm still learning to deserve it." And there, among sewing machines, broken stories, and mended hearts, something new began. Not perfect, but real, rooted in pain and in the daily choice to stay. 2 years passed since that afternoon when the warehouse witnessed the beginning of a quiet love, built through dust, work, and healing. Savannah kept its slow rhythm, but something had changed in the heart of the city, and in the hearts of those who dared to begin again. The Roots of Hope project now filled 2 full warehouses. Women who were once invisible now led teams, ran workshops, and taught others how to stitch their own stories. Angela Moreno's name started appearing in articles, conferences, and seminars, but she remained grounded, still wore jeans, still welcomed mothers looking for support. Only now, Ben walked beside her. No suit, no title, but with eyes more alive than ever. He had reinvented himself, began giving talks on business ethics, soul-centered leadership, and the power of recognizing privilege and using what you have to build bridges, not walls. No one applauded him as a hero. He didn't want applause. He wanted to be useful. That morning, the warehouse was simply decorated. Sunflowers in glass jars, embroidered tablecloths made by Latin American hands, children running between tables, while women cooked traditional food on improvised stoves. It was the project's 2-year anniversary, and no one there expected what was about to happen. Angela, with her hair down and a white cotton dress, stepped onto the small wooden stage with a microphone in hand. This project was born out of pain, out of struggle, but also out of faith. Faith that even wounded, we could bloom. Today, I thank every woman who said yes when everything said no, and every person who chose to plant instead of run. The audience gave a standing ovation, but in the back, Ben slowly approached. In his hands was a small, rustic wooden box, hand-carved. He knelt before her under the strands of yellow lights, hanging from the ceiling, and when the applause died down, silence filled the room. Angela looked at him, surprised, her heart racing. Ben opened the box. Inside was no gold, no diamonds, just a simple walnut wood ring, carefully polished, with the word C engraved discreetly inside. He looked up, voice trembling but full of truth. I didn't bring a symbol of achievement, Angela, because what we built was through sacrifice, through work, through silence and presence. You taught me to see beyond what I had. You taught me that true love can't be bought. It has to be grown. He took a deep breath, eyes shining. So, can I build the rest of life by your side? Angela bit her lip, holding back tears. Her eyes, now full, never left his. And she answered with the same voice that once sang softly while scrubbing marble floors. As long as you never forget that you saw me, not when I was shining, but when I was surviving. The room erupted in applause and tears. There was no orchestra, no luxury, no flashes. But there, under the simple lights of a warehouse where dreams were stitched with crooked lines, a true union was sealed. The final lesson: true love begins when pride ends, and when we choose to love without trying to own, because their love wasn't born from charm, but from the fall, not from easy romance, but from daily building, and now, rooted in what's real, it bloomed. So, what did you think of this story? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments. I really want to know how much this story touched you. If you liked it, give it a like, share it with someone special, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. And before you go, I've picked out another story, even more emotional, that's sure to touch your heart. Watch it now, and get ready to feel